The markets are cheerful but quiet. It's about a 2/3% gain that they have shown from the word go, 1/2 to 2/3%, and they've remained that way. The mid caps are up about 1%. So good going, but not too much activity, we'll have to say. I mean, yesterday we had a 9 lakh crore in terms of volume, a record volume traded. Compared to that, today is a quiet day, you'll have to say. But let's see how things pan out. Let's concentrate on the big macro numbers that will come out today as well as tomorrow. The economic survey comes out by about 11. We expect it could be tabled in the Rajya Sabha by Jayant Sinha at 11. And tomorrow, of course, at 11, we will have the big budget numbers. To check out what we should be watching out for, what should we consider credible, what should we consider overestimation. We have Govind Rao, member of the 14th Finance Commission and formerly professor, at the moment Professor Emeritus at NIPFP, almost a think tank on everything on public finance, as well A Prasanna, Chief Economist at ISEC PD, joining in to discuss those numbers. Good morning to both of you. Dr. Rao, what should be a legitimate nominal GDP increase that the budget should assume? If they said 13.5, should we say that they are overestimating?
Well, I think there is a considerable confusion on what the GDP growth has been because of the new set of numbers that have been put forth. And because of the inconsistency with the other macro variables that we have seen. But the Finance Commission itself has assumed a growth rate of somewhere about 13.5%, a nominal growth rate. Thankfully, the budget doesn't have to assume a real rate of growth. It has to basically look at the nominal growth rate of the GDP. And I think 13.5 assumption should be okay. Because, one expects the agricultural growth to be better this year. One expects a revival of the Indian economy, both in terms of manufacturing and services sectors. And, even if, so there will be certainly an acceleration in growth. Of course, there will be things go, hopefully the inflation will be in check. But I think, even if I think a 13% rate of growth should not be a very unrealistic assumption to make.
All right, let me just toss that to the other economist as well. Prasanna, if the budget were to assume 13%, will you say they are overestimating? I mean, last year the nominal number of 13.6 didn't come good, or 13.4 didn't come good. I think the actual number is 11. What will your report say? An overestimation budget?
No, not necessarily. I think we'll also go with 13% growth rate. So, all said and done, the CSO has given the new set of numbers and we have to go by that. And unless we have some more information or some changes in that, I think it's not right to say that. I think it's not right to disbelieve that and peg the growth rate at a lower level. And definitely for the government, it will be impossible to do that.
Okay. Mr. Govind Rao, good morning. So from the budget itself, what is the expectation as far as the fiscal deficit target is concerned? Because, there's this raging debate on whether the government will be able to meet its fiscal deficit target and unleash a big expenditure on capex and infra, etc. What is your own estimate?
I think, as far as the fiscal deficit targets are concerned, I don't think there is much of a choice, and then they will stick to 3.6% of GDP. What they can possibly do is, that revive that for investment in infrastructure, they can, if they want to, create some special purpose vehicles. Of course, that increases the contingent liabilities. Eventually, if they do, in a large measure, they may have to have a separate contingency mitigation fund. But at the same time, I think it is possible to actually boost investment through some special purpose vehicles for infrastructure. And I think quite a lot of the effort on infrastructure investment will depend upon unblocking the investment that are blocked, and that would require basically a whole lot of administrative measures. Because the Finance Commission has also insisted on containing the fiscal deficit at 3.6% this year, in 15-16. Yeah. One of the other things that they can possibly do is to really go back and then look at the centrally sponsored schemes and see where they can really reduce outlay on that. Because the Finance Commission has left a certain amount of space. But then if you really want to contain the whole purpose of the Finance Commission's this thing is, don't give too many conditionalities, give them much more flexibility and autonomy, and that's the point. Okay.
No, that point is taken, sir. Therefore, Prasanna, what will you assume is the central pool, net tax to the centre? Will it be less than the previous year, even aggregate?
Not necessarily. So what we are looking at is actually we think the government could actually increase some indirect taxes. For example, they could levy a customs duty on crude imports. Also, there is a possibility they might hike service tax by 2%. So they will do that, and therefore on a net basis still they should get a higher revenue than last year. And I think they don't have a choice. So like you mentioned, if 3.6% is important and you also want to increase spending on investments, and of course Finance Commission recommendations, you're giving a higher share to the states. I mean, if you have to meet all these constraints, you have to increase some tax rates, and I think indirect taxes are ripe for that.
Okay. Well, actually, just in case we lose out on time, Prasanna, what would you look for from the economic survey?
Yeah, so I think it will be interesting. I think the mid-year review kind of spoke about how the government should step up public spending or public investments. So maybe the economic survey would elaborate on that, and of course it will be reassuring if the economic survey also talks about the importance of fiscal deficit targets, because I think there is some lack of clarity on that when government officials speak about higher public spending. Do they mean that within the constraints of the fiscal roadmap, or are they looking to breach that? So that signal will be important from the economic survey.
Okay. Actually, I wanted to come back, on that point you made about the hike in indirect taxes and possibility of a hike in service taxes. Mr. Govind Rao, the constant over the last few budgets, and which has been very disappointing, is the overestimation of tax revenues, of divestment proceeds, etc., and something that doesn't eventually materialize. This time around, what is your own estimate of what will be done on the tax front and how it will be assessed?
Well, I think, you see, the mid-year review also brought out that particular thing very candidly when it said that the overestimation in tax forecasted to the tune of 0.8% of GDP. It also said that the spillover of the previous year's subsidies, the estimate of which varied from 0.3% of GDP to 1% of GDP, which brings the entire credibility of the budget itself into a question. Now the issue is, it's important that they emphasize the need to have a more credible budget. In fact, the Finance Commission's report, if you see carefully, has asked for an appointment of a fiscal council to evaluate these things. In fact, there is much more interesting recommendation on that in the Finance Commission report. But I think they will have to stand on a more realistic plane. They can't be just going on doing this. Yeah. And this is, just to show that we have 3.6% of GDP.
I agree, but actually isn't the market itself going into a level of overestimation, Prasanna? See, the mid-year review clearly told us that if you look at the historical buoyancy rate of the last 5 years, actually tax buoyancy is 0.8, 0.9. Giving the benefit of doubt to the government, even 0.9. And if you are expecting a 13% GDP growth, then, actually tax revenue should be only 12%. But almost all the economists whose reports I read are looking at a 14% tax revenue growth. So, is that all pinned on increasing the number of taxes, amount of taxes, rate of taxes?
Yeah, so I cannot speak for other people. So what we have
So what is your growth?
Is something like a 14% growth in taxes on the... Yeah, so we had assumed on a base case of 13% GDP growth, we had assumed a tax growth of 14%. On top of that, with the service tax hike and the customs duty hike on crude, then we are looking at a 19% hike in the gross taxes.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, one wonders if that will come good, because that buoyancy is a little more than what the last 5-year buoyancy has been. Okay, I'm told that we don't have too much time, so last question to both of you, and a similar question. Dr. Rao, what will you consider a good budget?
In fact, see, this question you asked me last time too. I consider a good budget which is realistic. It's not, it doesn't make too much of a claims. I consider a good budget which sticks to the deficit targets. I consider the good budget which substantially releases funds for productive capital investment and contains, you know, a whole lot of consumption subsidies and transfers.
Prasanna, what's a great budget?
Yeah, so a great budget will be again a budget which sticks to the 3.6% target with realistic numbers both on the taxes and the spending part, and something substantial on reforming public sector banks.
Okay, well, we just got the first step yesterday, the criteria for selecting chairman, but that discussion on another day. Thank you very much, Dr. Rao and Prasanna, for setting the stage for all the macro discussions we will have over the next 24 hours.